The protected waters of the Chesapeake Bay have been explored for centuries by those harvesting the great bounty of oysters and crabs, and those testing the waters of the New World. Join us as we canoe on the Chesapeake Bay and make our own adventure on Trailside.
Trailside is brought to you by Chevy Trailblazer, encouraging you to find your own little part of the planet.
Two great rivers, the Patuxent and the Potomac, join here just before spilling into the Chesapeake Bay and continuing their journey on to the Atlantic. The bay itself is one of the most important bodies of water on the East Coast. The region has been a center for human settlement for centuries and supports an incredible diversity of wildlife habitat. Its brackish waters are known for world-class sailing and some of the best oysters and crabs found anywhere on the planet. My guide is Kyle Rambo. He's been the Natural and Cultural Resource Manager here at the Patuxent River Naval Air Station since 1981. Don't let the fact that this is a military installation fool you. You're just as likely to find an osprey nest here as an airplane hangar. Good morning, Kyle.
Hi, Brian. Welcome to Maryland and the Patuxent River.
Oh, I'm excited to be here. This is quite a place.
Well, I think so, too. In fact, it's an exciting time to be here. We've got all kinds of wildlife activity with our winter residents just starting to pack up and move on, and our summer residents are just arriving.
So about how far are we from the confluence of the Patuxent and the Potomac rivers?
Oh, I think it's probably a half-mile upriver. We're standing on the shore of the Chesapeake Bay right now, but the mouth of the Patuxent's right here.
So you get quite a mixture of ocean and river ecosystems here, don't you?
Absolutely. In fact, try to imagine millions of gallons of fresh water dumping into the Chesapeake Bay through rivers like the Patuxent, and then the ocean tides pushing all that salt water into the Chesapeake, and this is the area where they mix.
So how big is the Chesapeake Bay?
Oh, it's a huge body of water. At 200 miles long, it's probably the largest estuary in North America, maybe the third largest in the entire world. Its headwaters lie all the way up in Cooperstown, New York, home of the Baseball Hall of Fame.
Well, I hope we're not going to canoe all the way up there.
Absolutely not, but let's go to the put-in and I'll show you where we will canoe.
All right.
Hi, Brian. Well, here we are at headwaters of Harper's Creek. Harper's Creek is one of 4 tidal creeks found here on the Naval Air Station. Our plan is to basically paddle the length of Harper's Creek.
Do we have to worry about tides through here?
Well, I don't think so. For most of the paddle, we won't. It's total tide range of maybe 18 inches, and the creek's fairly sheltered, so we're not going to worry about it in here. When we get to the inlet, though, there could be a bit of a rip, so we want to watch that.
So we just need to watch our backside through here?
Exactly. We know about it. We're going to be prepared for it. We'll just plan accordingly.
Okay.
The plan is to just paddle down the length of the creek. If we get down around halfway and start to get hungry, we'll stop and collect some lunch.
Collect some lunch? What kind of mess hall you got down here?
The best kind. We're going to pull the freshest oysters right out of the Chesapeake Bay here, cook them up on the spot.
Oh, that sounds awesome.
Yep. Should be a nice trip. After lunch, we'll continue our paddle on down and out the inlet. And with weather, good weather and wind permitting, we're going to go ahead and make a crossing, paddle across the bay to the Calvert Cliffs on the far side.
Okay.
I brought some special equipment along just to make sure we can do that safely.
What special equipment?
Dry suits, Brian. Air temperature this time of year might be in the 70s, but the water temperature is only in the 40s, and we've got to be concerned about hypothermia if we should accidentally go into the water.
Okay.
So let's take a look at that gear and see what we've got.
All right.
Brian, let's double check our gear, make sure we got everything we need here for this trip.
All right.
Brought the kitchen along here to cook up the oysters we're going to catch for lunch. We've got a double burner stove and all the pots, pans, utensils we'll need to make that oyster stew. And if we wanted to stop along the way for a hot beverage, a cup of coffee or hot chocolate, I brought a single burner backpack stove, the fuel for that. You can see we've got a nice mix of fresh vegetables, fruits for making up the best bowl of oyster stew you've ever had.
All right.
Pre-mix some of the ingredients to save us a little bit of time. And if you can't wait to eat for lunch, you still get hungry and need a snack, I brought some homemade beef jerky. We'll enjoy that along the way. I don't go on the road or a trip anywhere without some safety equipment like a first aid kit. I've got a compass, a GPS to help us just to make sure we're heading in the right direction. If we run into some foul weather, some rain, I've got a change of dry clothes, some rain gear here. Brought a set of extra binoculars for you so you can see some of the interesting wildlife and things that I'm going to be looking for.
Okay.
I mentioned the river crossing and wearing dry suits. Here they are.
Oh, yeah.
This is a contained unit with booties like this, a rubber sleeve around the neck, same thing on the arms. Should keep out of that cold water if we do happen to go overboard.
Okay.
Got dry bags to keep our gear nice and dry. And then, well, before we can cook up those oysters, of course, we've got to catch them and got to open them. I brought an oyster knife for you here so you can get a lesson in shucking oysters. They're not ready to eat right out of the creek. We've got to get them ready.
Okay.
Brought some gloves here we can wear when we're shucking those oysters and working with the knives for our own safety. But to catch the oyster, you're gonna have to go in the creek. That requires boots. I brought those. That's gonna require another thing. Hand me that device right there. Let me show you that.
What is this anyway?
Well, I call it an oyster rake. It's a homemade device. It's just a garden rake with a wire basket attached to the end. You're gonna wade out to the creek, scrape the bottom, trying to find these things growing there attached to rocks or other oyster shells, and anything you scrape up will end up in this basket. We pull it to the surface, we sort through it, we find the good edibles, and we throw out the non-edibles.
Okay. Well, what can I do to help you get this packed up?
Well, I'll tell you what, if you'll get the boat ready to go, I'll pack up the kitchen. We'll get going.
All right.
Hey, Brian, that looks like a good idea. Sun's out, starting to warm up a little bit. I think I might peel off a layer, too, once we get going here.
Oh, yeah.
How's the gear looking? Getting packed up?
Yeah, I think I've got everything packed away. You military boys sure pack a lot of stuff. I've gone on 7-day trips and not carried this much gear.
Oh, come on now. Let's just hope we're still not forgetting something. Why don't you grab the bow, I'll grab the stern, and we'll push off and get going.
All right. Obviously, there's a lot of air traffic here. What's the focus on the base? Just routine training?
Well, actually, Brian, it's more of a testing facility than a training base. Patuxent River is the Navy's premier research, development, test, and evaluation facility for all naval aviation. Basically, anything from a new device that's conceived to improve naval aviation to an entire new aircraft. It all comes out of Pax River.
So this is the cutting edge of naval aviation?
Absolutely. We see it all first before anything gets out to the fleet.
Isn't the Naval Academy in this area, too?
You bet. Naval Academy's in Annapolis, Maryland, just up the shore of the Chesapeake Bay. It's one of almost 30 installations sitting here on the Chesapeake. In fact, Department of Defense manages something like 25 million acres of land nationwide.
So how do you deal with the impact of all that military activity?
Well, it can be quite a challenge because not all that land is hangars and runways. We've got miles and miles of rivers, streams, shoreline. We've got forests, fields, and uplands. So all of those bases are hiring full-time professional natural resources staff, wildlife biologists, foresters, land managers to take care of those resources.
That's got to be quite the balancing act you have to play.
It is. We've got some good people, and I think we're doing a good job. So how you doing up there, Brian?
Well, I'm doing just great. Just kind of taking it all in. You know, these trees are pretty cool. They're so thick that I can hear the planes, but I can't see them.
It's because of the riparian forest buffer here.
Riparian forest, what?
Well, it sounds kind of fancy. All it means is there's a strip of trees left standing alongside the creek here. If there's trees already existing, we leave them. If there's any missing, we'll come back in and try and replenish them. But these riparian forest buffers provide some really important ecological services. Where you can see the trees hanging over the shore, over the water here, they cast shade, and the cooler water temperatures hold more dissolved oxygen, and that's real important for aquatic organisms. They provide food, habitat for wildlife, they provide control of stormwater runoff, helps prevent shoreline erosion, and one of the more important things that these riparian forest buffers do is they prevent excess nutrients from reaching the creek here.
Now, why would excess nutrients be a bad thing?
Well, excess nutrients are like fertilizer. If they reach the algae in these creeks, they cause the algae to bloom, and then that algal bloom prevents sunlight from penetrating through the water. That prevents the submerged aquatic vegetation from growing, and that's the food, the homes, the shelter for crabs, larval fish, and the dozens of species of waterfowl that visit here each winter.
You know, I never would have thought of that.
One other important thing that these buffers provide is a travel lane along these long linear corridors, these streams, for wildlife to move between large chunks of habitats.
Sort of like a greenway?
Exactly. In fact, if we come up around this corner here, I expect we might just see some wildlife.
Okay. Look at that guy over there. What's he doing, hunting?
Actually, they're just training.
Training? What kind of training is he doing?
That's my friend Tommy Wheeler. Hey, Tommy. He's training his Chesapeake Bay Retriever. Chesapeake is a special breed of dog bred right here in North America, specifically for waterfowl hunting and retrieving. When he steps out of the water there, you'll see he's got a long, curly coat. Keeps him from minding this cold water at all.
It's a beautiful dog.
Sure are.
So why is this particular spot such an important feeding ground?
Well, for the answer to that, Brian, look straight down.
All I see is weeds and water.
Well, those weeds are actually salad for ducks, called submerged aquatic vegetation, or SAV.
Isn't this water pretty salty?
Well, more brackish than salty, but the salinity is actually what determines which species grow here. There's over 500 species of SAV worldwide. We've only got 2 native to these creeks, horned pondweed and widgeon grass.
So the waterfowl eat the grass?
Oh yeah, they love this stuff. Ducks eat it, use it, it grows all spring, all summer through the warm weather months, and then sustains all those species of waterfowl through the long winter months. Hosts lots of other animals and organisms like minnows, juvenile fishes, molting blue crabs, things that need to hide from predators. Just a whole host of animals utilize it.
So no doubt you'll find fishing birds here too.
Oh yeah, as we've been paddling along, I've noticed things like cormorants, mergansers, herons. All these guys are sustained by the little fish that hang out in this grass. In fact, I've seen a number of osprey nests around here, and I know that those are feeding on these fish.
So the weeds are a good thing?
Oh yeah, in this case, it's actually a great thing. This is a great indicator of a healthy aquatic ecosystem. It shows that we don't have the excess nutrients, which cause algal blooms and then shade out this grass.
Looks like you got a pretty healthy creek here.
Doing all right. Brian, there's evidence of past human settlement all over these creeks if you know where to look. Anything here catch your eye?
Yeah, it looks like some birds were having an oyster bar party.
Not birds, Brian. People. This is an oyster shell midden. This is the garbage heap from prehistoric peoples. Hundreds, thousands of years worth of garbage dumped here.
Now, how can you tell that?
Well, it looks like a lot of oyster shell on the surface, but if you looked real careful and picked around there, you might actually find some artifacts left behind by those people, and I've brought a few examples along here. Stone tools is one. They would have started with an ordinary beach cobble like that and reduced it through a series of reducing flakes, taking smaller and smaller chunks off each of these things until they produce something like this spear point here. And you can find those in this midden. If you look real carefully, you might even find pottery sherds, pieces of broken pottery. And these pottery chunks might have come from vessels used to even store this oyster. The Indians here would have hunted for deer and other game. They would have collected fin fish out here, but probably the most important food source was oysters. You can tell from the volume of shell here how important it was. It was readily available in these bodies of water. It could be kept fresh right in these creeks and harvested year-round. So it was the food really that sustained these Indians.
Looks like food was plentiful too.
Oh, absolutely.
So are we landing or are we crashing?
Oh, landing, hopefully. But it's a good spot to get out and stretch our legs. There's something here I want to show you. All right, here we are. Hey, check this out, Brian.
Let me guess. prehistoric lunchbox.
Oh, Brian. You struggled a little bit with history class, didn't you? Let's see if I can put this together for you. This is history, human habitation, but it's a little bit more recent than those prehistoric middens we saw. We've got the ground littered with oyster shells. We've got coal laying around this old rusty metal thing here. It's an oyster cannery. This would have been a steamer. They harvested oysters from these creeks and brought them in here for shucking, cooking, processing, and then package them for shipping via steamboat up to Baltimore and D.C.
Oh, that's pretty neat. You know, all this talk about oysters is making me hungry.
Me too. What do you say we go see if we can't catch some?
All right.
Wow, Brian, looks like we're in a pretty hot oyster bar here.
This looks like nothing but a gravel pit to me.
Well, we do have some gravel here, but if it wasn't for the gravel, we wouldn't have oysters either.
Why is that?
Well, the oysters actually need gravel or some other hard substrate to attach to. They begin life as a free-swimming larvae in the water column. But when they're ready to become a hard-shelled oyster, they drop to the bottom. If they land on something hard, like another oyster shell or a piece of gravel, they do just fine. But if they land in soft mud, their life is over.
So what makes this a good oyster site?
Well, for us anyway, the water depth is perfect, so we can reach these oysters. It's shallow enough, but it's not too shallow where they would freeze in the wintertime. We've also got a nice flow of water coming through here, and that's important to an oyster because, well, they can't go after their food. They can only take what comes to them. They're stuck on the bottom, sitting there, and what they do is they open their bill, and as a filter feeder, they just take anything that comes to them in the water column, plankton, algae, things like that. So they're pretty much stuck there, and hoping that a good combination of water flow, temperature, and water depth gives us a good oyster bar.
So how do you tell a good oyster from a bad one?
But you can see in this rake and on the bottom, lots and lots of oyster shell. Most of it is old shell, it's dead. We need to harvest the live oysters. And to pick them out, you might notice that they grow a little differently. They grow generally upright with their bill pointing towards the surface.
Okay.
Where that old shell is laying flat on the bottom. When we bring them up in the rake, there's a slightly different color, you notice. And you can see we've got two halves attached rather than the single halves here.
Okay.
If the bill happens to be open, we want to give it a little tap and make sure it closes. It's a sign of a healthy oyster. If the halves stay open like that, the oyster could be sick or even dead. We don't want to eat that. We'll throw that out. So why don't you give it a shot, scrape the bottom, see what you can pull up, and I'll start up the pot.
Okay.
How'd you make out, Brian? We got enough for lunch or just a snack?
Oh, I hit the mother load. I got about a dozen.
I'll say you did well.
Yeah.
They're not going to shuck themselves, though, so come on up here and I'll show you how we do it.
Okay.
First thing I want you to do is grab your official oyster shucking glove and put that on there, because I hate to see you run an oyster knife through the palm of your hand.
Okay.
Reach in there and find yourself a good-looking oyster. I'll give you a quick lesson in oyster anatomy.
All right.
All right. An oyster shell, you may or may not know, has two different sides. It's got a bottom side, which is rounded. We call it the dish. And it's got an upper side, which is flat. I want to make sure you have the flat side facing up.
Okay.
Okay? Now, what we're going to do is we're going to open this oyster by its bill, this end right here. And to make that a little bit easier, you can take the tip of the knife and break away some of that bill. And it just helps expose that edge so you can find a way to get your knife in there.
Okay.
We slide the tip of the knife in between the two shells, gently like this. Now, the idea is to get that knife right along the upper shell until it slices through the muscle, the adductor muscle, which holds that oyster meat to the top shell. We pop off that shell, and what's left behind is a nice oyster meat.
Okay.
Now, we do the same thing to the bottom half of the shell. Separate that muscle,
All right.
and what you've got is a beautiful Chesapeake Bay oyster ready to eat. Now, of course, we're not putting this one in the stew. You know what we do with the first oyster of the day, don't you?
No.
Oh, let me show you. Put a little bit of hot sauce on there. Look at it, savor it a little bit. Isn't that a pretty looking oyster?
Yeah.
You'd like to try the first one?
No, that's okay.
Yeah, we're gonna give it a good sniff. Eat this thing raw. Slide it right down.
How is it?
That's a tasty oyster.
You're a brave man.
All right, we'll pop that one out. I want all the juice in here as well. We call that the oyster liquor.
Okay.
It's gonna help add flavor to our stew. Very good.
All right.
Shuck out the rest of that dozen. We'll have enough for lunch.
How's that?
Hey, Brian, nice job on the shucking. You can shuck for me any day. Well done. Now, while you were working on that, I was over here getting the stock ready. And it wasn't too hard because we had pre-mixed most of the ingredients. It consists of some cream, some butter, some white wine, and my special blend of secret ingredients. So now we're going to add the most important ingredient, the oysters. All right. Pouring them in here, adding that liquor that we saved and all the oysters. Going to stir them in, bring it up to temperature and cook it for about 5 minutes, but I want to make sure at no time do I let it boil.
How come?
Well, I want to make sure these oysters are nice and tender. If you overcook them, they'll be tough.
Okay.
So why don't you go ahead and get the mugs and find the bread. I'll get this ready and we're time for lunch.
All right.
All right.
Oh, yeah, that looks
Brian?
good.
Yeah. I'll tell you what. Bon appetit.
Oh, yeah. Nothing like fresh oysters.
Well, they sure don't come any fresher than this, do they? We don't want to rush you here, but day's wearing on a bit. Clouds are rolling in, getting a little milky up there. We still got a long paddle ahead, so finish that up. We'll slip into our dry suits and head on across the bay.
Okay. You know, these cliffs look a lot taller up close than they did out on the bay.
Well, they're almost 100 feet tall in some spots. These cliffs, you know, Brian, represents your next history lesson.
Is that right?
Yep. We're talking about a different period of history, a much older period of history than we've been dealing with. We're talking about geologic time now. These drum cliffs, the Calvert cliffs, and the Scientist cliffs up along the shore make up the largest Miocene exposure in all of eastern North America.
Miocene, what's that?
Miocene is that period in geologic time that dates from 10 to 15 million years ago. That's quite a long time. And that history is shown right here on these cliffs. If you look, you'll see different bands, different colors, different textures that represent different fossil-bearing formations. We have here a Chesapeake group comprised of 3 formations, the St. Mary's, the Calvert, and the Choptank formations. And each one of those represents a different period in time. Each one has different organisms in there. Some are as simple as little snails and other crustaceans, or as grand as things like entire whales, porpoises, dolphins, sharks, camels, and even mastodons. And all those can be found right here throughout this area.
Wow.
I brought a few samples along to show you. This one here is a giant scallop known as Chesapecten. It was the Indians that named this body of water Chesapeake Bay, meaning Great Shellfish Bay, all because of that crustacean.
Wow, that's pretty cool.
Look at something like this. We're talking about a giant whale vertebrae. That's fossilized, 10 to 15 million year old whale vertebrae. And if you're lucky enough, you might even find the entire skeleton or a skull. But here's the gem in my collection, this old granddaddy right here. That's a fossilized great white shark tooth. It's known as Carcharodon megalodon, or megamouth. And it would have been a shark 40 to 45 feet long. Can you imagine something like that?
That is incredible.
Wow. And so just by walking the cliffs here or the beaches below them, you can often find fossils like these.
So you're saying we can comb these beaches and find things like this?
If we're lucky, we might. Why don't we have a shot?
Okay. The Chesapeake Bay was one of the first cradles of civilization on the East Coast. For thousands of years, people have drawn sustenance here at the threshold between river and ocean. I'd like to thank Kyle for guiding me through the Patuxent River Station and for preparing a pretty terrific meal. His work here is proof positive that conservation need not get in the way of progress. We're going to continue exploring this beach for a while before we paddle back, but we'll see you on the next Trailside. Cooking outdoors doesn't need to be a grueling chore, and just keeping your cook stove clean can help it burn more efficiently. And using a windscreen can cut down on your cooking time. When selecting cookware, choose the black bottom pots. They heat up faster than the shiny reflective ones do. And always carry a basic spice kit like salt and pepper. They help liven up your meals.
To order home videos of this or any other Trailside program, or to order a Trailside guidebook, call 1-800-TRAILSIDE.